Okay, so we all have that one bad habit we desperately want to break, right? And yet somehow we just can't. Whether it's midnight doom scrolling, stress eating, or hitting snooze like 5 times every single morning, we've been told for decades that it's just a matter of discipline. Just try harder. But in today's explainer, we're diving straight into the dark science of why you can't break your worst habits. And we're going to reveal the actual truth here. The mechanics of your brain, not some sort of personal lack of willpower, are actually to blame for all of this. Let's be real for a second. Tell me if this sounds familiar. It's 9 a.m., you've just had your coffee, and you make a perfectly rational, ironclad plan to eat healthy today. Or maybe you promised yourself you're going to stay off social media while you work. You're highly motivated, you're locked in. But then, it's 3 p.m. You hit a massive wall of stress at work, and suddenly, without even consciously deciding to do it, you find yourself halfway through a bag of chips, or just mindlessly swiping through your phone. Now, we typically view this afternoon relapse as a personal failure. We think, oh, I'm just weak. But neuroscience tells us a completely different story. That relapse isn't a character flaw. It is a biological phenomenon of a brain operating exactly the way it was designed to under stress.
Okay, let's dive into this, because Dr. Judd Brewer, a neuroscientist and addiction psychiatrist over at Brown University, he points out a reality that kind of changes everything. The dominant advice for breaking bad habits has essentially always boiled down to willpower. Resist the urge, be more disciplined, just muscle through it. But scientifically, the research that was supposed to support willpower as a reliable mechanism for habit change has completely fallen apart. Everything you thought you knew about brute forcing your way out of a bad habit is flawed from the ground up.
So, to understand why, we really need to look under the hood. Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll cover the myth of willpower. Second, the brain's reward cascade. Third, the ventral to dorsal shift. Fourth, losing top-down control. And finally, number 5, updating your brain. All right, let's get right into section 1, the myth of willpower, and why trying harder simply fails. So, if willpower isn't the answer, why do we keep trying to use it? Well, the problem is that willpower relies entirely on your prefrontal cortex. That's the logical, rational, forward-thinking part of your brain. But here's the catch. The prefrontal cortex is the very first brain region to just go totally offline when you get stressed or tired. Relying on a brain region that literally shuts down the moment life gets hard isn't a viable strategy. Actually, scratch that. It's not a strategy at all, it's just a wish. To actually change a habit, you have to understand how it forms in the first place. And this brings us to what neuroscientists call reward-based learning. This is an elegantly simple survival system based on a continuous loop. Trigger, behavior, reward. You see food, you eat food, you feel good. Over time, your brain remembers exactly what you ate and where you found it. We really have to shift our focus away from modern morality and recognize that habit formation is an ancient evolutionary system designed solely to keep us alive. To really drive home how primal this system is, I want you to consider this number, 20,000. Scientists can actually observe this exact same dopamine-driven reward-based learning mechanism in sea slugs. Sea slugs, organisms that possess a total of only 20,000 neurons in their entire bodies. Eric Tandel literally won a Nobel Prize for mapping this out. So think about that for a second. It turns out your absolute worst habits are being driven by a survival script so basic, so deeply hardwired, that a sea slug runs the exact same software. No way, right? But it's true. Which brings us to section 2, the brain's reward cascade. Let's look at the chemical "do this again" tag. To see how this software runs, we need to look at the heavy machinery of your neural circuits. You see, this entire ancient system runs on dopamine. When you do something your brain codes as rewarding, like, say, eating a bunch of sugar or getting a shiny new notification on your phone, your dopamine neurons fire. What they do is essentially stamp that experience with a powerful chemical "do this again" tag. And over time, this repeated dopamine release stamps the behavior into an automatic, totally unconscious habit. You don't consciously decide to reach for your phone when you're feeling a bit anxious. Your dopamine pathways have already automated that behavior for you. You've laid down a deeply entrenched habit loop. Now, the actual engine room for these loops is called the basal ganglia. Think of it as a control center deep inside your brain that handles all of our automatic compulsive behaviors. It essentially operates in closed parallel loops. There's some incredible recent research out of Duke University where they actually visualized these exact circuits in mice, and they found distinct go pathways that trigger a routine action alongside stop pathways that inhibit it. When a habit is fully formed, it leaves a lasting mark on these specific circuits, making the go pathway significantly stronger whenever it's triggered by a familiar cue. Now, what's really interesting about this next part, section 3, the ventral to dorsal shift. This is all about changing real estate in the brain. Okay, so this brings us to a literal physical change happening inside your head. When you first start doing something, say driving a brand new route to work, it's what we call a goal-directed behavior. This activity happens in a region called the ventral striatum. It requires your conscious attention, it's highly flexible, and it's very sensitive to the outcome. You're looking at street signs, you're actively thinking, but as you repeat the action day after day and dopamine reinforces it, the behavior transitions into a habitual behavior, and it actually shifts neurological real estate up to the dorsal striatum. Here, the behavior becomes incredibly rigid, completely automatic, and bound to a stimulus rather than a conscious goal. You just do it without even thinking about it. You can literally see this physical shift taking place. Goal-directed actions start near the front, in the dorsal medial striatum. But as they become automatic, habitual actions, they physically migrate to the dorsolateral circuits. And we see this exact migration not just in harmless everyday habits, but in severe addiction and compulsive disorders. The brain is literally shifting its operating center from the conscious, valuation-driven ventral circuits straight over to the automatic, unyielding dorsal circuits. It's like a giant puzzle rearranging itself to lock the behavior in. As the pioneering psychologist William James wrote way back in 1890, and he hit the nail on the head here. Habit is thus the enormous flywheel of society, its most precious conservative agent. See, this biological mechanism wasn't meant to harm us. It was meant to put our lives on an effortless, energy-saving autopilot. By handing our mundane, daily details over to the basal ganglia's automatic custody, our higher brain functions are freed up to handle complex, novel problems. It's an absolute evolutionary masterpiece. Well, right up until it locks onto a destructive behavior.
Which leads us to section 4, losing top-down control, or what happens when the machine completely hijacks the pilot.
The stakes here get really high. When everyday habits turn into severe compulsions or addictions, we see profound structural changes in the brain that make simply stopping biologically monumental. As the brain's reward system becomes hypersensitive to habit cues, it actually diminishes the top-down regulatory control that is typically exerted by your prefrontal cortex. And the cost of this impaired prefrontal cortex, they are absolutely devastating. You get a loss of behavioral control, an inability to regulate your emotions, decreased focus and attention, and a total loss of delayed gratification. To put that into perspective, your brain's entire stop system becomes fundamentally broken, totally overpowered by the overwhelming strength of the newly reinforced go system in the striatum.
So whether we are talking about incessant doom scrolling, stress eating, or serious substance abuse, the underlying dark science is exactly the same. It is a fundamental transition from conscious desire, where you want to do something, to compulsive need, where you absolutely have to do it. The control shifts from top-down rational control to bottom-up impulsive control. Basically, the habit loop is now completely driving the car, and your rational brain, it's literally locked in the trunk.
So, the crucial point is, how do we break out of this? Section 5, updating your brain and short-circuiting the loop. Because this is a mechanical, neurobiological issue, it can be mechanically fixed. You don't need to be stronger, you need to be smarter about how your brain learns. Let's look at a highly practical, neuroscience-backed protocol from Dr. Jeb Brewer. He calls it the MAP protocol. For the first 3 days, don't even try to stop the habit. Just observe it. Step 1, pick your most costly bad habit. Step 2, every single time you catch yourself doing it, pause and ask, what was I feeling right before? Was it stress? Was it boredom? Step 3, ask, what did I do? And step 4, and this is absolutely crucial, do not skip this, ask, how do I feel right now after doing it? By bringing your conscious awareness back to the outcome, you force your prefrontal cortex to communicate with your basal ganglia. You are actively stepping back into the ventral striatum to reevaluate the actual reward. Listen, if you take away anything from this explainer today, let it be this. You are not broken. Your past failures to break bad habits were not moral failings. They were not a lack of character. Your brain was simply doing exactly what it evolved to do over millions of years under stress, defaulting to an ancient dopamine-driven habit loop to keep you safe. Your brain just needs an update. By mapping your habits and intentionally applying conscious awareness, you are literally rewiring the physical circuitry of your brain. You don't break bad habits by fighting them. You break them by understanding them. By shining the bright light of awareness on the trigger, the behavior, and the true lack of reward at the end of it, you slowly take the power away from the basal ganglia and you give it right back to your conscious mind. So I'll leave you with this question. Are you ready to stop fighting yourself and finally update your brain? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and good luck mapping those loops today.